Welcome back to Brush Up Your Game. Today we have the first in a designer series. This is an interview with Jack Reda of Future Pastimes Games. And Jack has done expansions for Cosmic Encounter, Dune, has been involved in Firefly Misbehavin', and some other games that you may or may not have heard of. We're going to go to an interview that I recorded earlier, but stay tuned and thank you for watching. Okay, so I'm kind of new at starting this designer interview series, but I wanted to reach out with someone connected to Cosmic because I love Cosmic. It's my favorite game, and I don't see anything ever displacing it in that position. But there's just so much going on there. So I wanted to lead off probably with what might be the most complicated question to you. But
Sure.
what goes into your design process? Whether it's Cosmic or something else, but just can you talk a bit about your design philosophy?
Sure. I mean, I think in terms of my overall philosophy, um, it encompasses a number of things. But when you're talking about a cosmic encounter, it's almost like a different process altogether. But I'll start with just my general design approach. For me, the thing that interests me the most about design is trying to put players in a position where they have to make what I call an excruciating decision.
Hmm.
That's my favorite thing
Okay.
in gaming. It's just like there's two things I can do and I really want to do both of them, but I can't. So I've got to figure out which one I'm going to do. And that's for me the biggest driving force in game design. And it's kind of abstract, but that's the thing, because I feel like if I'm not making an excruciating decision, then the game is basically playing itself, and that doesn't interest me at all. So I like to have some options, and I want them to be all things that I really want to do. And I would say that in terms of Cosmic Encounter, like designing the aliens, one of the things I took away from Kevin Wilson, because I got to work with him a little bit as a consultant while he was shepherding the Fantasy Flight edition of Cosmic, and he said that his design principle for the aliens was to try to make every alien one that you really want to play. And if you're given the choice between two of them, it's going to be a really difficult decision. So I definitely have taken that to heart. But at this point, when you're approaching design in Cosmic Encounter, not only after it's been around for over 42 years,
Hmm.
but you've got a catalog of now over 200 aliens. So what do you do? And every time an expansion would come out, I'd hear somebody say, "Well, I'm sure they can't think of any more aliens at this point," which to me was absurd, because in the 90s, I was coming up with so many ideas for aliens. I had my own personal set that I'd made that had over 300 aliens in it that I'd made. Now, a lot of them, turns out, were garbage, but, uh, you know, 10% of them were really good, and they've actually made their way into the published edition. So, I want to make sure that it's something that is fun to play, but at this point, I'm looking at, is it an alien that does something that no other alien does? Does it break into new areas in the game itself? Does it play the game differently? And that's one of the things that really interests me. But the other thing I have to take into account when I'm a designer, and this really became quite prevalent while I was one of the three designers on Cosmic Dominion, was that we were trying to appeal to a wider base than our own personal interests. So we had 30 aliens in that game, in that expansion, and it was really a matter of, like, we were all trying to pick our favorites, but I was trying to think in terms of, what are the favorite aliens that other people cite that I always scratch my head and go, I can't believe that's your favorite alien. But I wanted to reach those people, and I wanted to say, all right, this expansion should have something for everybody. Anybody who is a fan of Cosmic will find a number of aliens in there that they really love. There may be a few in there that they just can't wrap their head around, or they're like, ugh, I don't ever want to play that alien, and I think that's fine. But I'm always looking for trying to appeal to the widest range of players and fans as possible, and looking for things that other aliens just don't do. And so we get some in it. A lot of the ones that are red alert are going to be the ones that behave very differently. Some of the aliens, not that many, but some of them, it's almost like they're playing a different game. But again, I like that as well. I like that idea of, this is a completely different experience. And I would say the reason that Cosmic Encounter is my favorite game of all time is because few other games leave me feeling like at the end of it, I have a story to tell. Like I'm talking about the details of that game. And there are other games that I love. Like I love Dominion, but there aren't that many times that afterwards I feel like, yes, I had quite a tale to tell. This could never happen again. If we played those same kingdoms, it probably would happen again. So, because a lot of times, when I'm playing that, we're all trying to do the same thing for as long as possible until we can't. With Cosmic Encounter, that's much harder. You have a lot more singular experiences that are very, very difficult to reproduce again. Even with the same mix of aliens, it plays out so differently, and you have so many aliens now. So that's, for me, it's a game that has stories that you tell because they're just so unique and unusual every time you play it. So as a designer, I'm looking for helping the next generation of Cosmic fans to discover that same quality about the game, to go, oh my God, we had a game where everybody won the game, which is, that doesn't happen very often in Cosmic. Or we had a game where we got to the point where nobody could win because we destroyed so many planets. And that's just, I understand it. Some people would be like, well, that sounded very frustrating. I was like, no, it was hilarious. It was just amazing. Because we just had this great story to tell about this time that we played the game that's going to be like no other time anybody else has ever played it. So that's, for me, what I'm looking to get to as a designer.
Well, there's certainly a lot to unpack there. I'm sitting back and just listening as a fanboy for a minute there, going,
Yeah.
uh-huh,
Anytime you're
yep.
going to ask me a question, you're going to get a diatribe out of me.
No,
All I do is think about Cosmic Encounter and board games and board game design 7 days a week, and I dream about it as well. So
ooh.
I have a lot to force you to unpack, and that's no apologies. You're just going to have to deal with me.
No, not at all. I super appreciate that, because I know when I first made my own set of Cosmic, and I had a friend who had the original Eon set, and this is well before the Fantasy Flight set was in production. It's back in the dark days where there was no Cosmic. And I said, okay, it's great. I've got like 65 powers or so. They did not have the Lucre expansion because they said, nah, we don't want that kind of craziness in our game. But I spent a summer like photographing, violating copyright law. But I understand that. But then I went, okay, I want to try my hand at making my own powers. And I look back at them and I go, wow, those are all garbage. So I certainly can relate, as somebody who has no experience in game design, with saying, okay, it takes a long time to process that. And the experience it takes, the trial and error to have a lot of bad before you get the occasional good thing.
Yeah.
To kind of build off of that. So when you're designing a Cosmic set, and I know there's people you work with, wonderful people you work with, but so what's the process to take an idea for an alien power from the genesis of it to final design?
There's a couple of approaches that we use. So one of them that I like to use is I created a spreadsheet that has all the aliens in it, and then it's got column after column of categories about what the alien does or how it
Mm.
affects the game. For example, it'll say, this is an alien that helps you gain cards, or this is an alien that forces people to lose cards, or gives you ships, or gives you rewards, or interacts with destiny, or interacts with artifacts, or whatever. So just every possible version or iteration of what they do. And then I have little check boxes, and I keep track of, all right, how many aliens are gain card aliens? Well, there's a lot of them. So let's try to avoid designing more aliens that do that. And let's look at the areas that have very few or no entries at all. There aren't that many aliens that interact directly with reinforcement. So is there another one that does that? And that's how I came up with the idea for Bubble in Cosmic Odyssey. Are there any others that interact with Destiny? And that was one of the ways we came up with Dragon when we were playtesting that early on. So those sorts of things are one path that we use. Another one is when we're playing a game and we find ourselves in a situation and we're asking, saying to ourselves, I sure wish I could do X, Y, or Z right now. And we're like, oh, that's going to be an alien it's somehow. And so we'll write that down, and then we'll think about or talk out loud and brainstorm, what's a way to capitalize on this thing that you are not able to do in the game, but what if you could, and what would be a way to implement that? And then Peter Alaka likes to just take words and see if there's an alien there. He does it all the time. Somebody will say something like, well, I saw a dirigible the other day, and he's like, dirigible, power to float, and then he'll be like, is there an alien power there? And so we'll figure that out. And that was how Geek was born. He was like, I was talking about Board Game Geek one day, and he's like, there needs to be an alien called the Geek. He's like, I don't know what it'll do, but we need one. And so I was like, challenge accepted. And
Mm.
that night I came up with an idea that I really liked, and I brought it to them, and we played around with it, and it turned into an alien again that we added to Odyssey. So there's a few different approaches. Part of the charter that I kind of gave myself with Odyssey was that Peter and Bill were pining for the list of aliens that they had from the Eon days. So there were 75 aliens then. And of course, there's more than 75, but there were a lot of the original ones that had not made their way into the Fantasy Flight edition. And so they were like, we don't even care if it's the same effect, but we really want there to be an assessor alien and an aura alien, and it can do something different, but we kind of like they're completists, so they wanted to have that in there. So I was like, all right, I'll see if I can come up with some ways to either implement it as much as possible, or reinvent it, or take inspiration from it, or whatever. So there's a variety. There's a lot of familiar names for people who knew the Eon and even the Mayfair editions of Cosmic Encounter. They would recognize a lot of those names. And some of the aliens are very similar in spirit, if not in actual effect, to their original versions. So I was happy to be able to do that. But I had the opportunity to add in a lot of new aliens. So I was looking for, again, uncharted territory or areas where they're not really a lot of aliens that take advantage of it. And I would say the final thing, again, is the alert level. That's something that we're very cognizant of as we're designing. Peter and Bill especially want to have games, or not just games, but aliens within Cosmic Encounter that appeal to younger players. Peter's granddaughters are big fans of Cosmic Encounter, and in fact, they've contributed as well. So the Bride started off as a granddaughter alien idea called the Gown that she had gotten after going to a wedding. And then Whirligig was another one that one of his granddaughters had come up with. And so we took those concepts and we refined them and made them into viable aliens. But being able to have aliens that younger players can understand was important to us, to be able to have a lot of green alert aliens in there, not so many red alert aliens with a really thick wall of descriptive text in tiny font so that you can try to cover every edge case. Not that there aren't some that still do that. It is hard to avoid, especially if you're looking for a really interesting and innovative alien effect. And a lot of times you just got to throw extra text in there to cover weird edge cases and try to get out in front of the inevitable FAQ about that alien. But designing for again a wide audience of, all right, these are young players, these are old fans of Cosmic Encounter, these are people that want to try something new. So trying to get a little something for everybody. And then what we do is, because the four of us are actually geographically quite divided. We're in Massachusetts, Maine, Virginia, and Georgia, and have been for years. We use Tabletop Simulator to test everything out, and usually the four of us can test stuff to a certain point to say, all right, this has legs. I think this will work. And then we bring in a larger playtest community to get their impressions and make sure that there's at least a couple of people out of each one of those groups that will like every one of those aliens. So we have to make sure that we like it. Then we show it to other people to see if they like it, and then we send it to Fantasy Flight to see if they like it, because every once in a while they're like, this alien doesn't work. Send it back to the drawing board. So that's kind of our approach. Which again, it's a lot of different flavors of spaghetti that you throw at the wall and see what sticks.
Oh, that's a great phrase. I love that. Yeah, I remember when I was first playing Cosmic, I played a lot with a family friend and his younger siblings, and having simple powers that were still very powerful. Things like Sorcerer, Trader, even something like Chosen and Oracle. Something that does a very straightforward effect, but you still feel like you're powerful in the game and you've got a chance to win because of the alien in front of you. That's
Yeah,
a big factor in the game, where I see other games where a newer player or a younger player can get a simpler power or effect, but it kind of takes them out of contention in the game.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean that was important, and I think that the alert level was pretty well done. It's not based on power; it's just complexity, or more just familiarity with what Cosmic Encounter can be.
yes.
So an alien like Virus is not hard to understand, but the first time somebody sees it, they're like, how could this alien ever lose? How do you fight against something like that?
Correct.
And it takes somebody who's played the game a few times and understands some nuances to go, well, no, there's ways to get around it. And in fact, the Virus's win rate is not super impressive. It's decent, but there are other aliens that don't seem quite as powerful that happen to win a lot more often. So absolutely. And that's the same thing. I definitely use, when I'm teaching the game to new people, I'll stick to the green alert almost every time. And there's plenty to choose from now. And there's a lot of diverse effects so that they can say, wow, yeah, I can see that this is very asymmetrical in terms of what these aliens can do. And each one seems like it's really powerful, but the game finds a way to self-balance, and the players, they have some agency over that. So that's good. And a lot of players will pick up on that pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's one of the best lines I think I've ever heard about Cosmic. It is perfectly imbalanced.
Yes. Yes.
And
It
and then it's up to
took a
the
long time to
players.
make sure that was the case, but yeah, they definitely proved it. It was, and that's Peter's thing, is like, all right, don't worry about, is this too powerful? Let's see if the table can deal with it, and that will be the real test
Right.
of whether that alien design is good or not.
Yeah. And players have their ways of counteracting everything that's published. And
Yes.
that's where your playtesting comes in. It's I think knowing what little I know about the playtesting that goes into Cosmic, the game is playtested enough that there's a wide variety of people behind it who will seek to understand how these powers work, and the different styles of play that exist in the game are represented in playtest communities. So that much is very well done, and
Yeah.
is something I appreciate.
And I think Fantasy Flight does a pretty good job as well. When they get into their beta testing, by and large, they're looking to make sure that stuff is worded in a way that makes sense and will have the lowest common denominator in terms of comprehension. But their players, again, they sometimes they find stuff and they'll say, you know what, This is going to create havoc, and so they do a decent job of catching a lot of those things
Mm-hmm.
and helping to get it across the finish line.
Yeah. And I'm sure every rare once in a while something slips through and you go, oh, wait, whoops.
Yeah, there's no shortage of that. There's people who have been documenting like this is wrong and this is spelled incorrectly and this is a different format. And so yeah, it's a living, breathing, chaotic entity, but by and large, a force for good, I think. So
Yes. Uh, Now, aside from Cosmic, I know you're involved in one of the Dune games. Uh,
yeah, so classic Dune, which came out originally in '79, was out of print for a long, long time. It was there were more and longer Dark Ages for Dune than there were for Cosmic.
mhm.
But Gale Force 9 picked it up and started putting it out again in 2019.
Okay.
And that's when I joined Future Pastimes officially. And we were asked to start making expansions for it. So I've been deeply involved in the expansions for Classic Dune. And we also came up with this game called Arrakis Dawn of the Fremen, which is sort of a Dune re-theme of another old Future Pastimes game called Borderlands. But it has been revamped in a lot of different ways. It's very much different, and every change was not only thematic, but I think a big improvement on that game, which was a game that was really way ahead of its time. Just a really interesting resource management area control game with there's no hidden information. It's just, can you overpower the other player by how smartly you operate? And it's a really interesting, deep strategy game. So it's been fun to be a part of that. And one of the things that we do at Future Pastimes is they basically set the gold standard for the idea of expansions with that original Eon game that came out in 1977, having 9 expansions, which seems absurd to me back then. But I was so glad that it did. I really loved that idea. So we love expanding in everything that we do. And so we are designing expansions. Whether they'll ever be published remains to be seen. But we have a lot of really interesting ideas for Dune, for Cosmic Encounter, for Arrakis, for Firefly Misbehaving. It's just the process for us is so much fun, and we have so many ideas that we really want to bring to fruition. So it's been really exciting for me to be a part of it, and I have kind of become the driving force. I'm forcing everybody. I'm doing it every day, and the rest of the guys are like, "All right, yeah, we gotta." If Rita's in there doing it, we got to get in there too. So
Hmm.
it really forces us all to get together and just shape every idea into something that's as best as it can be.
Well, that's fantastic. I have not played that Dune game. I It's been on my radar. It's something I definitely want to try.
Yeah, we got to get you into TTS. The Dune board game community has created a mod of it for us.
Oh,
That's fantastic, and so we've done a couple of demos. We did an invitational game that we streamed, and we're planning to do another one probably in a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's if people who are not afraid to use Tabletop Simulator, there's some really good mods of pretty much all of the Future Pastimes games that have been put together more by enthusiastic fans than us. So we've been getting better and better at using that as a tool, not just for design, but for showcasing our designs. And so it helps to have this community. They're super friendly and engaging and enthusiastic. And yeah, they've made the whole process more fun for us to even do.
well, that's fantastic. I have the sense, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you are very in tune with what fans are saying about your games. You seem to thrive on fan interaction and while perhaps you won't listen to everything fans have to say and make game design choices based on fan what the fans are saying, it seems like
Well,
you're at
I'm a
least
fan
listening.
myself.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've got hundreds of games. I like a really wide range of different games. And when I found Board Game Geek, I found not only a community of like-minded people, but I found an outlet for me who likes to tinker with everyone else's games as well and come up with custom expansions and variants. And that's kind of how I got into game design. I was playing around with designing my own elements to Cosmic Encounter and to a certain extent to Dune. And that's how I got on the radar for Bill and Peter at Future Pastimes. And just by interacting with them and seeing just a wide range of Cosmic Encounter related stuff that I've created over the years, it's how Kevin Wilson realized that I was this giant cosmic super nerd that he should really consult. I have this whole website called The Warp that has been a Cosmic Encounter museum and resource. Yes, a couple of thousand aliens, most of which are somebody else's homebrew idea. It was really an excuse for me to put all of my ideas out there for people to be able to see. But I was like, I'll put everyone else's stuff in there too. Anyone who's a fan of Cosmic Encounter, here's a central place to find all the variants that you want to try out and see what works and what doesn't work for you. So for me, I'd like to engage with the community because I've always been a part of that community. And I do want to get the feedback. I want to know what people think. I want to know what it is that they like about a game or don't like about a game. In some ways, we can address that in an expansion. We can say, yeah, I wish there was more of this. And we can say, you know what, that's an area we could probably do in the expansion. In some cases, though, we're already well ahead and we're two expansions ahead on something. And people are, they'll have a comment or even a complaint, and but they're not aware of the big picture yet. In some cases, we can't even talk about whether or not there is an expansion coming out because that's something the publishers want to be in control of. So
Yeah.
I always have to talk in terms of like maybe potentially we could be doing something, and of course I've got to do that so that I can round up play testers. And if they sign the NDA, then they can actually get to know, all right, yeah, yes, there is an expansion, and here it is, and let's test it out. So getting that stuff. So I like to engage. I want to know what people think. I also want to make sure that people are playing our games and our expansions correctly. So I try to make myself available. If people have a question, they should feel free to ask me if they want to. One of the things I liked most about going to Gen Con this last summer was, I mean, the whole time I was there, I just did demos of Cosmic Odyssey, Arrakis, and Firefly Misbehaving. And it was a way for me to make sure that the people were learning the game. The rule books, we do our best with them. We're not rule book writers. It's not our strong area. We work with the publisher and we work with editors and whatnot, but there's always a better way that rule book probably could have been written. And some people, they can read a well-written rule book and still take away something not the way it was intended. So videos of it help, but it really helps for me to be able to demonstrate stuff and make sure that they know how to play it. And I was handing my card out to people saying, look, if you buy this game and you have a problem or a question, contact me. I want to make sure that you are playing it right and getting the best experience out of that as possible. It's the sort of thing that I would love other designers to do as well. There's been times where I was like, I don't know what this is supposed to do. A lot of people seem to love this game. It's falling flat for me, but maybe it's something that I'm doing. So sometimes the Board Game Geek or other gaming communities can help that out. And having a game taught to you by somebody who not only loves it but really understands it is the best way to learn a game. But it's not always possible. So yeah, absolutely. I want to be an accessible part of the board game community, as I think it ultimately serves the community better in the long run anyway.
I yeah, I agree. The best I'm thinking the way to explain that. I would say for me, the games I enjoy the most are ones where designers are engaged, or at least have been engaged in the past. There's been a few games where designers were kind of engaged in the beginning and then have moved on to other projects, so they're not as engaged anymore, 6 years
Sure.
down the road, but they were there for the beginning. And it's like, okay, hey, at least there's a history of that engagement where people can go look back on it.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking to somebody who's as enthusiastic about a particular game as I am, it becomes contagious. And
Yeah, it
I think
does.
when I sit down and play Cosmic Encounter with people and I'm teaching them the game, almost without exception, they walk away thinking, "Yeah, that was good. That was a good time." I can see why this is on a lot of people's top 100 games, or
Mm-hmm.
why somebody likes it so much. So for me, it's about trying to create that memorable experience, and I really try to get people to understand all the different factors that go into it. It's not just people who want to criticize Cosmic Encounter. They'll say, "Oh, it's just chaos. There's no decision, there's no strategy," and it's just not true. It's in there, um, and a lot of it is just how social the game is, and how the factor of trying to cajole and intimidate or convince other people to do your bidding is such an important part of that game. And it's not really something that the rule book says you should do this and you'll enjoy the game more if you do. It's just something you have to experience it. So that's why I have my local game store, and I'm always bugging them about, let me know if you want to have me come by and do an event. I'll teach one of our games, and or I'll teach an expansion. They can play with the designer. I'm a resource. I'm at your disposal. And again, it's just a way for me to engage with the community directly, so they can say, yeah, these games are fun, especially you learn how to play them, and then you see why I like it, and it becomes tangible for you as well.
No, that's fantastic. So we're talking about this idea, and I'll kind of let things go to this point. What do you hope that players get out of your games when they play them?
I think it's something that I touched on earlier. The idea of it's a game that has left you with a really interesting story that you tell about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened when we were playing this game. This happened and that happened, and people go, "Oh, wow, that sounds really great." I think of gamers as being of two basic types. People that look at games as this is a puzzle to be solved, and people that look at games as this is a shared adventure. I'm sitting down with these people.
Hmm.
We're going to have an adventure together. We may be working together or working against each other, or who knows what happens. And I'm definitely in both camps, but I would say I'm more in the shared adventure camp. So I want people to play my games and go, yeah, that was a memorable experience. I felt like we were all taking part in an adventure that left us with a story that we could tell. And to some degree, yeah, we were solving that game and figuring out, the optimal moves, and treating it like a puzzle. But when I play a more Euro-y game, it's more of a puzzle to be solved and less of a shared adventure, and that's probably why I gravitate more towards highly thematic games. Theme is super important to me. I love abstract games too, and I've got a lot of them, and I enjoy Euro games, and I love to try to blend that together to get some of that really interesting Euro game dynamic, which has a lot of a balance at its core, but then seeing what adding more theme does to that game. So that's for me, again, as a designer and again, as a gamer, that's what appeals to me. And that's what I'm hoping that my games and the expansions that I bring to other games will do for people, is it will make them feel like, yeah, I'm having a really interesting shared adventure with the other players. And it's something that I'll talk about for days, weeks, hopefully years. Like, oh, I couldn't believe it. There are a few games where I have that. Cosmic Encounter and Dune are definitely games where, again, you just get these situations that don't come up very often when you play them, and that's what makes them memorable. So I'm hoping to strive for that as well. It's great that my partners are my mentors as well. They really set the tone for that sort of experience in gaming. And so it's been great for me to be able to just latch onto them and drain their wisdom right out of them and try to inject it into a next generation of games.
Mm. I I'm thinking back to something you said right at the beginning. You spoke about how you want players to have to make a choice between two really good ideas,
Yeah.
and I think that speaks a lot to the designs I've seen from you, because there's other games, and I'm not here to bash other games, but there's other games where it seems like the choices you make are between two bad things, and you got to figure out the less bad idea, or maybe it's between two mediocre choices, and you're kind of going, well, I guess I'll go down this path. But I think there's something so much more engaging when it's, I could do this. Oh, but I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that keeps me wanting to come back and do that, to play those kind of games. Is that a. So I know that's an idea that drives a lot of your design choices. Do you ever have the thoughts of wanting to put in some of those, I don't know, like a negative event deck or something like that into a game where it would affect everyone at the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something that I don't shy away from. Cosmic Encounter has its hazard deck, and what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting about that was it started off as a homebrew idea from Cosmic fans in Massachusetts way back, probably in the '80s, if not earlier, and it was an event deck, but a lot of the events were just super negative, and so I liked the idea. And when I made my own in the '90s. Um, it was more of a uh, tough choices. Like, here's if you do this, this will happen, but if you do this, this will happen, and you're trying to minimize the damage, but at least you have some agency over it. And the Fantasy Flight version of the Hazard deck is somewhere in the middle. And was one of the things with Cosmic Odyssey when I was adding new hazards was I tried to get it closer to the ideas that I had when I was re-implementing that as a concept. So the dealing with negative events is something I'm totally into. I totally understand it. I like it for something that if you're playing a game that has almost a repetitive, iterative element to it, having those unexpected, occasionally bad things that will influence the whole group or force them all to react in different ways, I think is good. I wrote a review of Power Grid years ago, and it was called the best design game I ever didn't like.
Hmm.
And I think Power Grid is an amazing design. It does a lot of really elegant things, but it's not a game that I particularly enjoy because at its heart, it's very mathematical, and math is not my best area. So when I play it with my friend Todd, who is very mathematically driven, he will destroy me at that game. And I found that, you know what this game needs is an event deck. It needs something that every once in a while it changes up stuff so that you can't just use your math to see yourself to the end of the game knowing, well, if I just do this, I've created an engine and voila, I can't lose. But like, all right, there's a crisis somewhere in the world and the price of oil has gone up. I mean, that seemed very thematic to me for a game like Power Grid. But and I started making one, but I don't even have Power Grid. And I was like, why am I putting all this effort into designing an expansion for a game that I don't own and probably won't buy, just so that I can have a better chance of winning it against my friend who does own it. So I never followed through on that, but it was a concept that I did like and felt that game, not that it needed it, but for me, it needed it. So I know that a lot of other people would be like, we don't want to go anywhere near that. And I understand that because it does or interact with and affect the elegance of that design. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. But there for me, it would have been a matter of how can you add more thematic elements to a very straightforward design process. Not necessarily a simple one, but like I said, it's elegant. Everything clicks together really well. It's a great design, but I felt like more thematics would have made it better for me as a player. So I like those ideas of the event thing, especially if it is something that injects more theme to a game. That's for me is I guess it's another. It's not necessarily high on the list, but it is something that I find important as a designer and as a player of a game. Is I really like the theme to come through, so I'm always looking for ways to have that realized.
Hmm. You've got my mental engine turning here of like event decks that could go into games and make them more interesting.
Yeah, for me, it's always about variable player power. That's the first thing that
Yes.
I always look for. And, Cosmic Encounter more or less invented that. And so, like for instance, I did a video. One of the things that I do on my YouTube is I'm showcasing my custom expansions and variants for other games that I have nothing to do with the design. And one of them is Seven Wonders. And I remember the first time I played it, where they were handing out the wonders, and I was like, "Oh, these are going to have variable player powers," and they don't really. There's a little bit there, like when you build your middle section of your
Yeah.
wonder, there's a unique thing you can do, but it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be, especially because, as I say in the video, the first time I played it, I was the Pyramids of Giza, which
Oh.
has no special abilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just more victory points. So I was like, oh, so I went right home that night. And again, this was a game I didn't own at the time. I have it now, but I started designing variable player powers for all of the different wonders in that game. So yeah, that is the thing that I go to. But yeah, an event deck is another great way to really look at. All right, it's something in there. I have a video coming out tomorrow where that's essentially what I did as an event deck for a game. It's a game I really love, but I was like, I could use a little bit more thematic element in part of the game. So that's just the way that my brain works.
And it's not that you even need to play it all the time. Just having the option to play it every so often seems like it
Yeah.
could help. Yeah.
I would say that, one of the other lessons I learned from Kevin Wilson, it was really great to be able to just talk about board games and board game design with him over those years that he was shepherding Cosmic Encounter. Was he was a big fan about thinking of the concept of a variety of outcomes.
Mm.
There's how many different ways will this game play out? How many different ways can the game end? Is it just, either I win or you win? Are there other ways that this can reach its conclusion, like different ways to win or different things that lead to the win, or whatever, however that manifests, and it can be in a variety of ways. And so that's one of the reasons why I love modular expansion elements. Technology and Cosmic Encounter. I don't use it all the time, but I like to throw it in there because it does create a new element that will lead to the outcome of that game. And so
Hmm.
Cosmic Encounter is so great because the basic structure of the game is so robust and sound that you can throw so many other variants on top of it, and it doesn't take away from the game. It just takes it in a new direction. And I think that's one of the reasons why the campaign works so well in Odyssey is that it guides you through the variants. You can all right, it tells you use this variant, and then in the next game, now you're going to use that variant, and so it makes it easy. You're not having to think about that part. You just plug and play, and you do it, and it really changes up the game in a lot of interesting and unusual ways. And again, it just leads for these fantastic stories about, wow, in this game, this is how it was supposed to go, but because we had this variant in there, it went in a totally different direction than anybody was anticipating. And that's what excites me about it. So yeah, I love that sort of thing, and I love that idea of a variety of outcomes. It really forces me as a designer to think about what that play experience is going to be like, and what's the replayability experience going to be like. Is it going to play out the same way, or is it going to be wildly different from one game to the next? Because to me, that's the best possible outcome. is like we played this game and then we sat down and played it again, and it was utterly different. How everything worked out. So that's what I love about board game design and games. And the games that I play the most are the ones that have the biggest variety of outcomes.
I'm with you on that. It's I don't like my game to be samey.
Yeah,
Uh, Personally, for me, I love the space stations in Cosmic, and now that there's more of them, I
yeah,
I like that. I
yeah. That was my favorite thing about Cosmic Storm, and the only thing that I was lamenting was, oh, there's only 10.
I
I
know.
was like, oh, I wish there were 50 of them. So we still don't have 50, but now we've got a pretty decent number of them, and it's an interesting, pretty low impact. It's
Yeah.
not a lot to keep track of, but you've got an interesting thing to think about. You have a new dynamic about how much you want to defend that planet.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, a lot of times you're like, I've got 5 planets. I can afford to lose a colony on this
Mm-hmm.
one. But you're like, I don't want to lose that ability.
Right.
And
Right.
the only reason that somebody is going to attack you on that planet is not to gain the ability themselves. It's just to deny you. And so, again, that's different. That's unusual in Cosmic. So
It
that's what
is.
appeals to me about that. I'm always looking for ways to take the game in a new direction or to play around with a new concept and implement it in there. So that's yeah, I love that sort of thing.
Well, maybe someday we'll have 50 space stations.
I mean, I've done this. I've started this little personal project that I call Beyond Odyssey, and it's just homebrew ideas. Some of it's
Mm.
stuff that just didn't make it into the expansion. Some of it is ideas that other people have come up with. They've been inspired by the expansion, and then just after I turned everything into Fantasy Flight, I came up with 20 more ideas, and I was like, oh, wish I could have included that. So I've been homebrewing my own additional space stations and evolutions and hazards and technologies and stuff. And I've got really good templates in Photoshop so I can make really nice looking assets for Tabletop Simulator.
Mm.
And my plan is to start doing invitational games and just start having like a Beyond Odyssey campaigns and games that Future Pastimes will host and share with the community so that they can say, yeah, this is unofficial content, but it's inspired by the stuff that the fans are doing and that we're doing as fans to continue enriching and expanding the cosmic universe. Some stuff we hope will get published in a future expansion, but at some point, Fantasy Flight is going to say, "You guys have to stop. This is enough," and we hope to never hear that, but we know that it's coming at some point. But it's not going to stop us from continuing to create more stuff. So,
Mm.
50 space stations, yes, challenge accepted.
Awesome. I love to hear that. I don't want to ever hear there's an end.
Exactly.
I like inevitably I know it's gonna happen at some point, but I'm greedy and I just want more. I'm grateful for everything that we have.
Yeah.
And I will never say that I'm not grateful because Cosmic's provided so many friendships throughout the years, so many amazing memories. I still remember one of the, gosh, probably first 20 or so games of Cosmic I played where everybody got to win except me. And I still remember that. And in the moment, it kind of hurts. And afterwards, you're like, okay, yeah, that happened. All right, moving on. Let's play again.
Cosmic was the game that taught me how to lose.
Yeah.
Um, because when I was younger, I was not a fan of losing. I'm very competitive. But more and more, I've embraced this idea of the shared adventure. And so I stop myself in the middle of the game and I say, hey, you're having a good time here. So if you don't win, don't forget that. And it's something that
Yeah.
I try to teach my kids as well. When things are going their way, especially when I know this is not going to last, I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to beat you. I want to remind them, hey, we're having fun, right? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have to do this to you. So those sort of thing, I think, understanding that even though you didn't win, you still had a good time. And again, I've had those stories again where everybody won except me, and it's a story that I like to tell. It was like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened in this game. Just some crazy stuff that every time I thought, all right, I finally can turn this around. And then somebody was like, "Well, I have this card. Will that stop you?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes, that'll stop me."
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
the
it's
one.
just
It's too much fun. Well, no such thing as too much fun. It's so much fun. Cosmic holds this amazing part of my heart and my being of just this. I don't ever want to imagine what my life would be like if I had never played Cosmic.
yeah, just would not be would be like having to live in black and white and no color.
Ooh.
It really just for me it's added so much depth to my board gaming experience and life experience. To be honest, I just really feel like um, I've gotten a lot out of it. It's reading people. I never played a ton of poker, um, but Cosmic Encounter is like poker, and you are bluffing and you are intimidating when you've got no way to back it up,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that sort of thing. And just being able to read the table and find alliances with like-minded people that you can exploit, that sort of thing. It's really just an amazing game, and yeah, it's a whole experience. It's an experience. You're not just, oh, we got to play this. I've got to make sure that I get these ships onto those planets. It's a whole experience.
Yeah, and understanding all things are temporary and cosmic, and none of it's
Exactly.
gonna last.
You got to
Well,
make do. You got to make your best move at any given moment,
mm-hmm.
and you got to think about, all right, I've got a good card and a bad card. When do I want to play that bad card? Because I'm going to have to play it at some point, most likely. So trying to think about it in those terms. So yeah, that's for me. I could talk Cosmic Encounter all the time, and if you ever want to just get together again to talk about like a specific area, I mean, we've kind of covered the whole
Yeah,
gamut of gaming in a lot of different ways, but yeah, we can just, like, let's have a conversation about negotiations. Let's talk
sure.
about these three aliens. You let me know, and I'm there.
I
I'm
I
happy to
would
chit
love to
chat
do
about that.
that. I will take you up on that for sure. Well, Jack, let me throw it to you. Feel free to plug your channel by all means. And
Sure. I mean, I'm sure that you have the technology to put up a link, but yeah,
oh yeah,
it's informally. It's called the Warp. It started off. It was just focused on Cosmic Encounter, but after I was officially part of Future Pastimes, I was like, you know what, this is a great way for me to talk about our games, to talk about insights and strategy tips. And then I was like, you know what? I've got all these custom expansions for other games. I'm just going to talk about that as well because I like talking about it. So, and occasionally I'll share files with people or like, hey, can you send me this? And I'm like, send me an email. I'll send it to you. So I'm happy to do that. If it makes somebody else's gaming experience better, I'm only too happy to help out. So yeah, come check it out. Watch some of that. It's just me showing off gaming components mostly, but I'm enthusiastic about it, so I got that going for me.
well, I've been enjoying watching your content. I can say that. So, uh, to everyone watching this, go check them out. It's fun stuff. Jack, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. As you can tell, you put two people in a room together or on video together who love talking cosmic, and something good comes out of this.
Absolutely.
Don't know if it's all
You know,
completely
this
relevant, but it's fun.
this video may be just the thing that pushes somebody into going, you know what? Let's go play it. Somebody said they mentioned it, they've got it, whatever. And if we convert one person to Cosmic Encounter, then this whole conversation was totally worth it.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. On that note, we'll wrap it up, at least wrap the recording up. Jack, thank you for your time. Truly
My
appreciate that.
pleasure.